The following story is a fictional narration intended for storytelling purposes.
I came back from a 6-week trip expecting silence on my land. Instead, I found a full-blown music festival, tents, food trucks, bass shaking the hills. My pond was gone. My gate ripped out. And the worst part? They acted like I was the trespasser. That's when the war began. When I turned off the county road onto the dirt path leading to my land, I felt something was off before I even saw it. Cars, dozens of them, lined the edge of the road, parked half on grass, half on gravel like a half-assed parade. As I drove farther, the trees parted and I saw it. People, tents, food trucks, a goddamn stage with scaffolding, and loud thumping bass echoing across the hills. I was gone for 6 weeks. 6. I left the land locked up, fences closed, cameras offline to save battery. It was supposed to be quiet. Now it looked like Coachella had festered and vomited on my property. I stopped at my main gate, or what used to be my main gate. It had been removed entirely, replaced with a rental event barrier and a smug-looking rent-a-cop in a vest. I stepped out of the truck. "Sir, this area is restricted," he said, not even blinking. "Event access only. You'll need a pass." I stared at him for a second. "I own this land." He raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Then you'll need to speak with the HOA. They're managing the site this weekend." "I'm not part of any damn HOA," I snapped. "This is private, fenced, registered land, and nobody asked for permission to—" "Talk to them," he repeated, cutting me off. "I just do what I'm paid for." So I did what any rational man would do in Texas when he realizes someone's thrown a music festival on his 40 acres without asking. I circled around the back, drove onto an old service trail, parked in the trees, and approached on foot. The scene made my blood run cold. A full-blown concert stage stood right where my garden used to be. Lights, speakers, tents, vendors slinging overpriced tacos and beer. My pond had been drained. Someone drove heavy machinery over my fields, turning the grass into mud and tire ruts. People lounged in chairs that weren't theirs. Kids ran wild, and the smell of weed hung heavy in the air. And there, standing like some monarch surveying her kingdom, was Karen Trinholm, president of the Crescent Hill HOA. Blonde bob, khaki capris, clipboard, wine glass. When she saw me storming through the crowd, her face shifted from surprise to that condescending smile she probably practiced in the mirror. "Oh, Mr. Marlowe, you're back so soon." "Back from where?" I snapped. "From my own property?" She had the audacity to laugh. "Well, we assumed the land was unused." "You assumed wrong." She sipped her wine like this was brunch and not a felony in progress. "We signed a temporary community use agreement with a holding representative. It's all filed. The property has been vacant for ages." "No," I said, stepping closer. "There's no representative. There's me. I own this. It's not for rent, not for parties, and not for public goddamn use." She waved her hand as if I was interrupting her day spa. "It's just a weekend event. You weren't here, and the community needed a space." "I'm calling my lawyer." I stormed off to the edge of the crowd and called Casey Lowell. She didn't ask questions, just said she'd draft the suit immediately and file an emergency injunction. But while Casey played chess, I was ready to throw the board off the table. 45 minutes later, I came back in my Dodge Ram 3500 with reinforced bumpers. I pulled up right in front of the stage, rolled down the window, and grabbed the old bullhorn I kept from my bridge inspection days. "You've got 30 seconds to get off this stage," I shouted. "This is private property. Leave or be arrested." Some people laughed. A few pulled out phones. The band kept tuning their guitars, so I hit the gas. The truck rammed the side scaffolding with a scream of twisting metal and a thunder of chaos. The stage buckled on the left, lighting rigs fell sideways, and the crowd erupted. I stepped out of the truck, grabbed the wireless mic from the half-toppled mixer board, and yelled loud enough to silence the music. "This is private land. The event is illegal. You're trespassing. Get off my property now." And that's when they hit me. A group of 3 men rushed me. Event crew, I think. I caught a punch to the ribs, then another to the jaw. I tried to shove one off, but someone blindsided me from behind. My head rang. Then someone hit me with something hard. Maybe a metal pipe, maybe a boot heel. I heard shouting, someone yelling for security, and then nothing but white. Then black. When I came to, it wasn't to the sound of music or the roar of a crowd, but the sterile beeping of a heart monitor. The ceiling above me was white, cracked in one corner with a dull fluorescent light that buzzed just enough to make my head pound worse than it already did. My mouth tasted like copper and dust. It took me a few seconds to realize I couldn't move my left arm. I turned my head, slowly, painfully, and saw it encased in a thick white cast. My ribs ached with every breath, my face felt swollen, and the dull throb behind my eyes told me I'd been out cold for longer than I wanted to know. A nurse noticed I was awake and called for a doctor. That's when Casey walked in, her suit wrinkled, her hair tied back, dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Ethan," she said quietly, pulling up a chair, "you're lucky to be alive. They beat the hell out of you." "What? How long?" I croaked. 4 days. You've been in a coma for 4 days. She hesitated. "And there's more. While you were out, Karen filed charges: destruction of property, trespassing, reckless endangerment. They're trying to paint you as some lunatic who stormed a peaceful event." I stared at her, trying to process the insanity of it. My land, my pond, my stage they built without permission, and now I was the criminal? "She's using the fact that you drove into the stage," Casey continued. "They're calling it premeditated, and with the injuries, they're arguing you started the fight." I tried to sit up. The pain shot through me so sharply that I gasped. Falling back, Casey gently put a hand on my good shoulder. "Don't. You're banged up pretty bad. Ribs fractured, concussion, broken arm, and you've got charges hanging over your head." I clenched my teeth. "You're handling it." "Already on it," she said, her voice turning steel hard. "The cameras, Ethan. Your hidden cameras. They recorded everything. The locks being cut, the trucks rolling in, the stage going up, Karen's little speech about how you don't use the land, so we will. The whole fight. All of it. We've got them dead to rights. I'm filing motions today to have the charges against you dropped and new charges filed against Karen and the organizers. I'm talking trespassing, fraud, assault, false statements to law enforcement. The works." I managed a tight, pained grin. "Good. And Ethan," she leaned closer, "the footage has already made it to the DA. They're reviewing it. The police are under fire for not responding properly. 2 officers have been suspended pending investigation." I closed my eyes for a moment, the relief mixing with the ache in my bones. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't over. Karen wouldn't stop until she was forced to stop. "You're safe," Casey added, "for now, but the charges are still on the books until we get them dropped. And until then, you're technically out on medical release. We've got work to do." I opened my eyes again, locking onto hers. "Then let's get to it." The next 24 hours were a blur of IV drips, morphine haze, and legal maneuvers. Casey never left the hospital. She turned the corner of my room into a war room, laptop open, files spread out, Bluetooth earpiece glued to her head as she coordinated with investigators, media contacts, and the district attorney's office. Meanwhile, I lay there, a wreck of bruises and bandages, trying to stay alert through the painkillers. By mid-morning, the tide began to shift. Casey's paralegal showed up with a hard drive. It contained every minute of surveillance footage recorded by the hidden cameras I'd installed years ago, motion-activated, battery-powered, and invisible unless you knew where to look. I'd placed them there for coyotes and trespassers, not concerts and crimes, but they turned out to be gold. The footage was worse than I remembered. Karen, wearing her trademark visor and pastel authority complex, strutted across my property days before the festival. She cut through the padlock with bolt cutters and led a crew of contractors like she was some pioneer staking land that had somehow fallen from the sky. She waved her arms, pointed at the pond, barked orders. "Level this part, the stage goes here." You could hear her clearly on the audio. "He never uses it. He's gone. This land deserves to serve the community." Other clips showed workers removing my signs. Private property, no trespassing, then covering the gaps in the fence with banners from the HOA. My name wasn't mentioned once. They weren't just ignoring me. They had rewritten the narrative entirely. The final footage showing me being surrounded and beaten unconscious while trying to speak into the microphone was sickening. One of them had even turned off the amp right before throwing the first punch. Coordinated, deliberate. Casey immediately sent the files to the district attorney's office with a formal motion to dismiss all charges against me. At the same time, she drafted a civil complaint thick enough to crush a desk: invasion of property, willful destruction, fraud, assault, defamation, illegal use of land for profit, every count backed by high-definition evidence and timestamps. Then, as if the universe decided to chime in, the media exploded. The footage leaked. I don't know who did it. Casey swore it wasn't her. But suddenly, local outlets from Austin were airing side-by-side clips. Karen grinning on the stage with a wine glass. Then the footage of her cutting locks and giving orders like a petty dictator. Social media devoured it. A TikTok account labeled HOA Hellscape posted the beating clip overlaid with circus music. It hit 3 million views in a day. The hashtag started trending. Our Karen Fest, our stage on stolen land, free the owner. By late afternoon, 2 of the event organizers publicly distanced themselves from Karen. One issued a statement claiming they had no idea the land wasn't legitimately leased. Another went further, admitted on video they'd been told some guy had gone off-grid and the HOA had temporary control. Casey's phone lit up nonstop. Reporters wanted interviews. A lawyer representing a vendor threatened to sue the HOA for fraud. And then, the cherry on top, a call from the district attorney's office. They were dropping the charges. All of them. More than that, the DA announced that their office would begin an investigation into Crescent Hill HOA for criminal conspiracy, filing false documents, and obstruction of justice. Casey just smiled when she hung up. "We're not just going to beat this," she said. "We're going to dismantle it." The next morning, the hospital room was quieter, but my phone wasn't. It buzzed with message after message, friends, business partners, even a few clients from Europe who'd seen the news. My face had become the unfortunate centerpiece of 100 headlines. HOA throws festival on private land, while owner in Europe, engineer beaten on his own property, Texas man wakes from coma to criminal charges, then turns the tables. There was even a meme circulating with my bruised face photoshopped onto a medieval knight holding a deed like a sword. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Casey, of course, wasn't amused by any of it. She was already coordinating depositions. The moment the charges were dropped, she filed a new motion for a temporary restraining order against Crescent Hill HOA, Karen Trenholm, and every contractor involved in the event. By noon, the judge signed off. My land was now legally shielded. Anyone stepping foot on it without my explicit consent would face arrest. At the same time, she filed the civil suit. It wasn't just against Karen now. It named the entire HOA board. 3 organizers, the hired security company, the stage contractor, and even the food truck collective. Her strategy was scorched earth. If you touched the property, you were liable. The numbers attached weren't small. Damages for physical injury, destruction of land, misappropriation of private property, emotional trauma, legal costs, environmental remediation. The total, just shy of $2.5 million. And while all of this was happening, the festival's sponsors, local companies, a brewery, a bank, began pulling out one by one. They cited gross misrepresentation by the event organizers and unauthorized use of private land. A few even offered public apologies. The HOA tried to downplay it all, releasing a press statement calling the incident a misunderstanding. But that didn't survive more than an hour online. Someone leaked a video of Karen at a pre-event meeting saying, "He's not around. He never is." It's land just sitting there. It might as well serve the community. It wasn't just arrogance. It was evidence. Direct. Damning. And exactly what we needed. Then came the police. Not for me this time. 2 detectives from the county sheriff's office came to the hospital. They didn't handcuff anyone, but they asked for access to my statement and security footage. Casey gave it all to them, along with a list of everyone who had been on site the day of the attack. According to them, they had just launched an official criminal investigation into assault and conspiracy to commit fraud. They were already reviewing warrants for arrests. And just like that, the narrative shifted. From property dispute to coordinated criminal trespass. From rowdy festival gone wrong to premeditated takeover, Karen, for the first time, wasn't in front of the cameras. The HOA's official site went offline. Their lawyer stopped answering calls. And the local news station that first tried to paint me as a vigilante ran a new segment. Exclusive. Private land owner vindicated as charges dropped. New footage reveals shocking HOA behavior. I sat up in bed for the first time that day. My ribs screamed, but I welcomed the pain. It was proof I was still in the fight. 3 days later, I was released from the hospital under strict instructions. No heavy movement, no stress, no sudden motions. which was laughable considering my life had turned into a legal landmine field, but I followed orders. I went home, to my actual house this time, not the war zone my land had become, and settled in with painkillers, a cast, and an ice pack duct taped to my side. Casey didn't slow down. By the time I was sipping watered-down coffee in my kitchen, she was already knee-deep in pre-trial discovery. Subpoenas went out like candy at Halloween to HOA board members, festival contractors, the company that printed the signage, the rental firm that delivered the porta-potties. Every single one of them had signed off on something that didn't legally exist. And it got better. An anonymous tip landed in Casey's inbox, an audio file recorded on someone's phone during a HOA strategy call. You could hear Karen unmistakably saying, "If he comes back early, we'll deal with it. He's one guy. What's he gonna do? Sue us all." Laughter followed. One voice added, "As long as no one gets hurt, it's just optics." A second later, Karen again. "And if he makes a scene, he'll look insane. We'll call the cops first." The smugness in her voice was enough to make my broken ribs ache harder. Casey smiled as she added the recording to our growing pile of evidence. They didn't just ignore your rights. They planned this. Meanwhile, back at the property, things were unraveling fast. The restraining order was enforced. Deputies from the sheriff's office posted signs along the perimeter, "Private property under investigation. No entry without warrant." They took statements from the remaining contractors, seized staging equipment, and impounded the sound rig. I watched it all through live feeds, now reconnected to my camera network. And then the sheriff's office issued arrest warrants. 3 men were picked up the next morning, 2 from the security company who'd been recorded punching me, and one of the organizers who'd helped push me off the stage platform. Assault with intent, battery, conspiracy to commit trespass. The usual suspects. News helicopters hovered over the arrest. I watched Karen's house on a separate feed. She hadn't been arrested yet, but she wasn't exactly relaxing either. Every time a car pulled into her cul-de-sac, she yanked her blinds down and peeked through. It was only a matter of time. That same day, my land assessor came by to do an official damage evaluation. I couldn't be there in person, so I watched the footage as he surveyed the scene. Ruts from construction vehicles, compacted topsoil, damage to the irrigation line, pond drainage, and 30 or so square feet of scorched ground where some moron had apparently set up fireworks without telling anyone. Estimated remediation cost, over $400,000. I sent the footage straight to Casey, along with a short message. Raise the ask. We're not settling. The next 48 hours passed in a haze of headlines and subpoenas. I couldn't move much without aching, but I didn't need to. Casey moved for both of us, with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of someone personally offended by HOA tyranny. Every hour she uncovered a new layer of rot. Turns out, the HOA had used member dues to fund the entire festival. Equipment, security, signage, even catering. Not only had they illegally occupied private land, they'd done it using funds that homeowners hadn't authorized. That's when we realized this wasn't just a property crime, it was financial fraud. HOA members, those who lived in Crescent Hill Estates and had trusted Karen to beautify the community, were now furious. Casey arranged a town hall meeting via livestream open to verified residents. I joined, still bandaged, still furious, and watched as dozens of faces lit up my screen. "We didn't know," one woman said, voice shaking. "We didn't know they spent our dues on this." "I thought it was on city land," someone else added. "Karen told us it was a community partnership." Casey didn't hold back. She laid out every fact, every document, every signature that proved otherwise. When she played the audio file, the one where Karen laughed about me being just one guy, the chat exploded. Some were horrified, others just angry they'd been lied to. The HOA board fractured that night. 3 members resigned. One posted a public apology, naming Karen as the sole initiator of the operation and promising to cooperate fully with law enforcement. But Karen wasn't done yet. The next morning, we received word that she had filed for emergency arbitration. She was trying to spin the entire lawsuit as a civil misunderstanding and push it into HOA-controlled mediation. A classic move, drag the fight into her playground where she could stall, deflect, and manipulate the narrative with just enough legal jargon to confuse the judge. Casey's response: a countersuit filed in federal court. This wasn't a homeowner dispute. It was property fraud, interstate financial misappropriation, conspiracy, and assault. With the video evidence already reviewed by the DA, we had no intention of playing by HOA rules. At the same time, the sheriff's office executed a search warrant on Karen's residence. They seized electronics, HOA records, and communications with vendors. According to the preliminary report, they found multiple fake documents created to resemble contracts and leases, including the fraudulent temporary management agreement she'd given to the police on day one. It was clearly fabricated, poorly too. The notary stamp had the wrong county number and the listed legal representative, a deceased man. Karen was arrested that evening. News crews caught her being led out in cuffs, still wearing her HOA blazer like it was armor. Her face was red, but she didn't scream, didn't cry, just stared into the cameras like a woman convinced the world had misunderstood her genius. It was almost funny. Almost. Except I was still sleeping upright in a chair because lying down made my ribs scream. Except my land still looked like a war zone, and my phone still buzzed every time a new article dropped. Casey sat across from me that night, laptop open, files scattered across my kitchen table. "We're winning," she said quietly. "We haven't won," I replied. She nodded once. "Not yet." And then she slid a new document toward me. "Let's hit them where it hurts next. Class action." My eyebrows rose. "We represent the HOA members too," she continued. "Every single person Karen defrauded, every misused dollar, every false promise. We tie the board into it. Clean sweep." I stared at the paper for a long moment, then signed at the bottom. If they thought beating me bloody would make me disappear, they severely miscalculated. The day after Karen's arrest, something shifted. Not just in the air, not just in the headlines, but in the tone of every conversation around the case. The HOA, once so smugly unshakable, had gone radio silent. No press statements, no lawyers issuing warnings. Just a black hole where their arrogance used to be. Their official website still read Community First, but the only thing that loaded was a 404 error, symbolic honestly. Meanwhile, Casey went for the throat. With Karen in custody and the fraudulent documents under investigation, we moved ahead with the class action. She compiled a detailed complaint representing 27 residents from Crescent Hill Estates, all furious their dues had been weaponized without consent. We named the acting treasurer, the events chair, and the 2 remaining board members. Turns out, one of them had signed off on a 5-figure invoice labeled Festival Sanitation Logistics, which turned out to be porta potties, kegs, and private security. That line item alone had eaten a quarter of the HOA's annual budget. Casey added it to the federal complaint. Then she issued a subpoena for the HOA's complete financial history for the last 3 years. That's when the real rot came spilling out. Over the next week, forensic accountants uncovered nearly $75,000 in misappropriated funds, everything from vendor kickbacks to forged maintenance requests. The HOA had been Karen's personal sandbox, and she'd built castles out of community money. One resident emailed Casey directly to say his HOA dues had mysteriously tripled the month before the festival. Another found her signature on a landscaping invoice for work that had never been done. Public reaction turned vicious. Local newspapers ran stories with headlines like HOA or Ponzi scheme and how one woman turned community governance into personal empire. A neighbor launched a GoFundMe called Sue Karen into the Sun, and it raised 10 grand in under 24 hours. I didn't keep a cent of it, but the message was clear. Nobody was on her side anymore. At the same time, the sheriff's office continued rounding up the rest of the crew that had turned my property into a riot zone. Another event organizer was arrested in Houston after trying to skip town. The head of the private security firm turned himself in after seeing his name on the county warrant list. The man who'd hit me with a mic stand, yes, apparently that was the object, was now facing felony battery charges. And still, amid all that chaos, my land was a wreck. I made the slow, painful ride out there 2 weeks after the attack. Casey insisted on coming, even if she spent most of the trip voice dictating to her assistant. I had to brace myself before stepping out of the truck, ribs wrapped tight, arms still in a sling. The moment my boots hit the ground, I felt it. Rage, heavy and suffocating, crawling up from the dirt. The grass was dead. The field where my kids used to run had been trampled into hardpan. My pond was now just a depression in the earth with garbage at the bottom, beer cans, glow sticks, one mangled speaker grill. The stage remnants had been cleared by the sheriff's crew, but the tire tracks were still there, like scars across the land. I stood there for a long time, breathing through my teeth. "This is why we finish it," Casey said behind me. I nodded. We walked the perimeter. She filmed a new batch of documentation on her phone, more material for court. A drone photographer we'd hired buzzed overhead, capturing aerial shots of the damage. At one point, I stopped and pulled out a plastic shard from the ground. It was part of one of my no trespassing signs, snapped in two and buried under the dirt like it had never mattered. But it did matter, every inch of it. Before we left, I took one of the sheriff's laminated investigation notices and tacked it onto the fence post with a nail and a hammer I had in the truck. Just beneath it, I added a hand-scrawled sign of my own. Private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted. HOA free zone. You've been warned. Then I got in the truck and told Casey, "Let's finish burning it down." She didn't ask what I meant. She already knew. By the time we reached the courtroom steps for the pre-trial hearing, the circus had already set up outside. News vans lined the block. Protesters with homemade signs had taken positions near the courthouse entrance. Some were HOA residents demanding restitution. Others just came for the spectacle. A few waved cardboard cutouts of Karen's mugshot. One guy held a sign that read, "Trespass this Karen," with an arrow pointing down. Subtle. I walked in through the side entrance, escorted by deputies, my arm still in a sling and ribs held together by tape and rage. Casey flanked me like a bodyguard with a law degree, carrying a folder thick enough to knock a man unconscious. We weren't here to posture, we were here to end it. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Karen sat at the defendant's table, lips tight, expression composed but brittle. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too optimistic and tried not to look at me. Her lawyer, a corporate type flown in from Dallas, was trying to downplay everything. A misunderstanding, he called it. A series of logistical missteps. He even dared to suggest that I had responded emotionally rather than reasonably. Casey stood up so smoothly it was like she levitated. "Your Honor," she said, voice calm as a guillotine. "My client was in a coma for 4 days because of those missteps. We have footage of Ms. Trenholm authorizing the invasion of his land, the destruction of his property, and the assault on his person. We have bank records showing misappropriation of HOA funds. We have residents who were defrauded and vendors who were deceived. This was not a misunderstanding. It was organized theft disguised as civic engagement." The judge didn't blink. He turned to Karen. "Mrs. Trenholm, do you or your counsel deny the authenticity of the surveillance footage submitted?" Karen's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. Karen didn't speak. The silence was deafening. The judge tapped his pen. "In that case, the court is inclined to proceed with a formal trial on all counts unless an agreement is reached within 10 business days." Karen's team requested a recess. They knew the walls were closing in. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed us. Casey gave a brief statement. I said nothing. I didn't have to. The image of me standing there, bruised and stitched, beside a lawyer with the look of a wolf mid-hunt, said more than I ever could. Back at home, I finally started to sleep more than 2 hours at a time. The land was quiet again. Deputies still patrolled occasionally to keep reporters off the grass, but the worst of the noise had passed, for now. Then came the real bombshell. One of the organizers flipped. We got the call at 7 a.m. A young man named Cody, stagehand minor logistics manager, had come forward to law enforcement. He provided text messages and emails proving Karen had not only orchestrated the event, but explicitly instructed everyone involved to lie if confronted. In one message, she told him, "If anyone asks, say we're on city-permitted land. Never say Ethan's name. Never mention the lock." Another email included a PDF attachment titled Temporary Use Agreement Template with a note. "Fill this in and print it. Make it look official in case someone challenges us." It was game over. The DA called Casey personally. They were upgrading the charges against Karen to include document forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud. The HOA board, what was left of it, was being subpoenaed for testimony. 3 more arrests followed that afternoon. I sat on the porch that evening, a blanket over my lap and a bourbon in my good hand. The sky was clean for the first time in weeks. No drone buzz, no music, no entitled voices telling me how the community felt entitled to something they didn't own. Just the wind, the trees, and the soft creak of my own house. Quiet, like it used to be. It wasn't over yet, but I could smell the smoke from the bridges they'd burned trying to steal what was mine. 10 days later, the trial date was officially set. State vs. Karen Trenholm and others. Multiple charges, multiple defendants. The courthouse cleared its calendar for what the county clerk called, with almost giddy anticipation, the biggest HOA trial in Travis County history. I wasn't sure whether to be honored or insulted by that. In the meantime, the cleanup had finally begun. I hired a restoration crew, local, honest, no clipboard warriors, to undo the carnage. The first priority was the pond. They cleared out the trash, redug the basin, rerouted the drainage, and refilled it with filtered water from a nearby supplier. I stood there on my crutches and watched it come back to life, inch by inch, like watching an organ start to beat again after flatlining. One of the workers found a rusted folding chair at the bottom, still covered in glitter. I told them to keep it as a trophy. We reseeded the fields, repaired the fencing, and poured new concrete for the main gateposts. This time, I went full Fort Knox, motion sensors, automated gates, perimeter lighting, and a few signs that didn't mince words. Private property, not HOA land, no trespassing. We mean it. Casey was handling the court side of things with surgical focus. Karen had lost her HOA presidency, her public reputation, and now her freedom was up for grabs. The final charge sheet read like a novel: trespassing, property damage, conspiracy, document forgery, misuse of public funds, filing false police reports, and incitement to violence. That last one was thanks to Cody, the whistleblower, who showed the DA a group chat where Karen had egged on the idea of scaring him off if he shows up. Yeah, that didn't age well. 3 of the men who attacked me pled guilty. One accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Karen. The others? They'd be going to trial alongside her. The judge had agreed to sever my civil suit from the criminal case for now, so I could recover damages without waiting for the verdict. Casey filed the final damage claim, over $800,000 in physical repair, legal fees, lost value, and emotional distress. Karen's lawyers tried to negotiate. They wanted to reach a settlement and avoid further public exposure. Casey responded with a polite but lethal one-liner. There is no settlement when your client built a concert venue on private land and beat the owner into a coma. The final straw came a few days before trial. The county's Internal Affairs Division released their findings. The 2 responding officers who refused to intervene when I first reported the trespass had violated protocol. Not only had they ignored evidence, but they had also failed to document the initial complaint entirely. Both were fired. One was already under review for misconduct in another case. Their departures weren't quiet, and the sheriff's office issued a public apology, stating they regret the failure to act in defense of private property rights. That night, I stood by the pond again. It was dusk. The water was calm, the wind soft. No cameras, no police tape, just silence. For the first time since I got off that plane from Europe, the land felt like it was mine again. Casey called me as the sun dipped below the trees. "You ready for tomorrow?" she asked. I looked out over the property, saw the lights flicker on across the fence line, saw the cameras blink red, recording. "Yeah," I said. "Let's finish what they started." Courtroom benches creaked with bodies crammed in like it was a playoff game. Reporters, neighbors, ex-HOA members, everyone wanted a front row seat for Karen's reckoning. The judge entered with the weariness of someone who'd already read every exhibit twice. No cameras were allowed inside, but that didn't stop sketches from flooding the internet. One in particular caught traction. Me, bruised but upright, sitting across from Karen, her face stretched tight like a sheet that had been ironed too many times. They started with the footage. There was no need to dramatize anything. The video spoke for itself. Karen, bolt cutters in hand. Karen barking orders over the flattened grass. Karen sipping wine while a crew erected a concert stage on a property that didn't belong to her. The courtroom was silent except for the quiet click of the projector and the occasional shift of someone uncomfortable in their seat. Then came the text messages. Karen's own words projected 10 feet tall. "If he comes back, we'll handle it. He's just one guy." And, "Make the docs look legit. Most people won't question them." Even her defense lawyer didn't try to spin that one. He just shifted in his seat and avoided eye contact. Witnesses were called. HOA members testified they were never informed. One said she'd been told the festival was city-sponsored. Another admitted Karen pressured them to vote yes on funding without showing any paperwork. Vendors took the stand, too. One described being handed an envelope of cash labeled site fee and told, "Don't ask questions." Then it was my turn. I walked slowly to the witness stand. My ribs were mostly healed, though they still ached in the mornings. I wore a navy suit that barely fit over the sling, still bracing my arm. I told the truth. All of it. How I came home early, how I saw the floodlights before I saw the stage, how I tried to reason, how I was dismissed, how I drove away and came back with the only thing I had left, control over my own damn land, how I was beaten, left unconscious, and woke up with felony charges against me. I didn't cry, but I think Karen wanted me to. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty. On every count. Karen didn't flinch when the verdict was read, but I saw it in her knuckles, white, gripping the table like it might anchor her to this world where her delusions no longer held power. Sentencing came fast. 5 years in state prison. No parole for at least 3, plus restitution, plus permanent removal from any HOA leadership positions statewide. The judge even included a line about gross abuse of communal trust. Her lawyer tried to object. The judge told him to sit down. The rest followed like dominoes. The organizers were sentenced to lesser terms, 2 years each, some on probation. The security firm settled privately and closed its doors. My civil case landed like a hammer, $875,000 awarded in damages, plus an additional $120,000 in punitive sanctions against the HOA itself. The class action by residents was still pending, but rumors swirled they'd settle in the 7 figures. When it was all over, I walked out of that courtroom into sunlight that felt earned. Weeks later, I stood at the gate of my land. New concrete, laser-cut steel, motion sensors. The pond sparkled again. The grass was green. A new sign greeted anyone foolish enough to think they could try me twice. Private ranch. No HOA. Trespass. Franger's prosecution. Just ask Karen. I didn't smile much those days, but that one got a smirk out of me. Some wars you don't start, but once they're at your door, you finish them completely.